Camera heads like for her.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Maya Luria with TMC for Seniors, and today we are going to be talking about navigating the road, older adults and driving. I have got two officers here with me today. We have Officer William Bonanno and Officer Ed Schwinn with the Tucson Police Department, and they've put together a lot of information that I think many of us ask about, right? When is it time? Do we need to stop driving? What does that look like? And so I want to welcome you gentlemen here today to share. How are you?
We're doing great. Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I've gone ahead, I put your PowerPoint up. You do have folks that are watching online today, along with an in-person audience. If you're watching at home, please feel free to, if you've got a question for the officers, go ahead and put them into the chat for us, and I will ask those when you finish. You're all set to go. Thank you.
Okay. Without further ado, would you like it? We're going to just introduce ourselves real quick, just so you have a little bit of an idea of our backgrounds and what qualifies us to come talk to you about this stuff. So this is my partner, Ed Schwinn, and I'll let him start.
So I've been with TPD tomorrow. It will be 30 years. Thank you. I hope I get a pin. But most of my career has been in the realm of traffic enforcement. So in October of 1998, I went to the Tucson Police Department motorcycle unit. And so I was a day motor for about 2 years. And then I went to the 9th Motor Squad from 2000 to 2006. So I met Officer Bonanno before that, but we worked together extensively in the DUI squad. My kids got old enough to notice I was missing. I went back to days, and then I did another stint on nights from 2017 to about 2020, somewhere in there. Anyway, my whole focus really has been traffic enforcement my entire career. I have both my parents. I'm very fortunate to have them still. My dad's 84. My mom's 82. She does not drive anymore, thankfully. My dad does still drive, and I'll be sharing some stories about him later in the class. But currently, I'm still as a motorcycle officer doing traffic enforcement. So we've seen a lot of collisions. I've dealt with thousands and thousands of traffic stops, different people and different ages, and I'll share my experiences as it relates to that. Okay.
Thanks, Ed. Again, my name is Wayne Bonanno. I'm also obviously a Tucson police officer. Not quite as long as Officer Schwinn, but I'm getting ready to hit my 27th year here at the department. Officer Schwinn was kind of kind. He didn't throw this out there, but I actually met Ed before I was even a police officer. I came out and visited the area. I actually did a ride along with him when he was still a patrol officer. And
when I had hair.
I have a little bit, well, 2 or 3. But it was just a great time. We became friends. We both came from back east, so we kind of connected, and we've been friends ever since. Similar to Ed, when I started, I was assigned to the east side here after I got out of the academy. I did patrol stuff for about 2 years. I had a specific passion for doing impaired driving enforcement, function of our traffic division, where we do traffic enforcement, but the emphasis is on folks that are impaired by alcohol or drugs. So took an interest to that. I was assigned to the impaired driving enforcement unit, DUI unit here back in 2000 was my first stint there. I did 8 years there. Very involved assignment. So after 8 years, I took a break. I came back out here to the east side of town, where I was back out as a patrol officer on the east side here for 8 more years. I still had a passion for doing impaired driving and whatnot. And then in 2016, they kind of dragged me back into that unit just because we don't have a whole lot of folks that really enjoy putting in those kind of hours and whatnot. A lot of court involved and things like that. So since 2016, I've been back there, and it's a great time. We have a good time. So like Ed said, we see a lot of drivers, a lot of infractions. And I know we can see with the title of this, Navigating the Roads for older adults in driving. We're talking about some of the things, the common mistakes that we see, and some of the suggestions that we would have for everybody. But this is a tough topic to talk about because, we all know we're eventually going to age. And when is that time to maybe stop driving? And that's a really hard question to answer. Everybody's going to be a little bit different. So we're going to go over some things that kind of revolve around that topic. It's certainly not something I ever want to approach, and I'm sure I'll fight it till the bitter end, but I would hope that my family at some point will make that decision and say, for your safety and for others' safety, maybe we need to find an alternative way to get around. So that's kind of what we're going to revolve around here today. Hopefully we can give you some ideas and some tips, maybe educate you a little bit on some of the laws that a lot of people are unfamiliar with, and hopefully provide you with some resources. Now I'll tell you, I put the PowerPoint together. It's about 32 slides that we're going to talk about. What makes this great is if you guys have some questions as we're going around, we're going to try and interject some stories, some personal stories to make it a little bit more enjoyable. But with regards to the slides, I really found a lot of my material from AARP and AAA. They have a ton of resources online. So you'll see a lot of things online with regards to those organizations that kind of mimic what we're going to talk about. And then we'll give you some of the real life versions of what we see here. Make sense?
How many people are still driving? I need everybody's driver's license. Proof of insurance real quick. I just wanted to touch on what he was saying. You're talking about independence, right? And with my father, who's 84, going to be 85, he still drives pretty well. However, I have some concerns about maintaining his lane and other things. And he lives off into the mountains, and he is not close to services, so that may be a consideration as far as there's no buses that go out there. We try to maybe encourage him to move into the city a little bit where we don't have to burden that as much because my wife and I are still working. So we'll talk about stuff like that. I know it's a big deal. My dad does not want to stop driving. And when I asked him, I said, hey, what are you going to do when you can't drive anymore? And his response is, there's no guarantee that's going to happen. So he buries his head in the sand. And for my profession, whenever we have a problem, and that's all we are, we solve problems and give resources, we're always trying to think of ahead of time, what are we going to do if this occurs? He doesn't want to even deal with that. So that's, I think, one of the things I wanted to talk to you guys about is, hey, maybe we need to start thinking about if you have a loved one or you yourself are having a difficult time getting around, at least you have some kind of plan should you not be able to physically drive anymore. He goes to the hospital, his knee's all blown up and he's on some medications and like, you really should be driving. So, I'm gonna still drive. So just something to think about as we go through this.
As I mentioned in the beginning, I mean, that's a difficult subject to talk about. I can kind of look ahead and put myself in that position and really go, I can't imagine that I'm not going to be able to drive somewhere or get to where I need to go to a doctor's appointment, get around town, socialize with friends. That's a hard question to ask ourselves. The things that we need to obviously think about are the other folks on the road and then ourselves. We often forget about that. It becomes much more dangerous as we get older. We're going to talk about some of it. Let me hit on some of these statistics real quick. I took these from our statistics for last year. It's amazing. And unfortunately, people say, Tucson, the drivers are terrible, blah, blah, blah. It's really across the country today. I get to travel quite a bit. Ed travels quite a bit. I see the same thing. If I go to California, the drivers are driving crazy. I go back east. My mom lives in Massachusetts. Ed's got some family that's in New Jersey still. I go back there and it's like, what the heck is going on here? But it is. People ask me right now, my department has asked me sometimes, and I didn't pose this to Ed, so I'm curious to see what his thoughts are on it. What can we do to make our roads safer? Because we have an abundance of crashes. 1,900 reported last year. Those are just reported. We have a lot of them that go unreported. but 1,900 crashes last year that we responded to in the city limits of Tucson. We had 91 fatalities last year as a result of those crashes. Just astronomical numbers. It was almost identical to the year before as well. So it hasn't gotten any better. So different people, because of our experience, have posed that question. Well, what can we do? More red lights? Do we put more signs? Do we do this? Do we lower the speed limits? And it's an interesting concept. We almost have the perfect storm because we have some folks, and we have many, for lack of a better word, snowbirds that come in just for the wintertime. No? Or are we all year-round residents? Okay. Well, we have the folks that come in from out of town. Some of the folks that are older. We have a large population of some of our younger folks from colleges and things of that nature. So now we have this kind of brewing of a perfect storm. Typically, older folks are going to drive a little bit more slower, a little bit more reasonable. And you have the younger folks that are a little bit faster. Okay, and then you have these wild card in between because we have a lot of different demographics here. So it's kind of the perfect storm. Good drivers, bad drivers, and now we put them all together, and you have some of the younger folks that want to go fast and get to where they're going, and some of the older folks who are like, I'm not in a hurry, I'm going to get there when I get there. It's not a bad mentality. But now you have all of these differences, and we have these kind of unofficial road rages, and then it ultimately results in a crash. So I'm not quite sure how we fix that. I think this is a good start. I think this class is going to be great because I think I would hope that everybody here today will leave, our folks that are home will maybe take some things and go, I don't always do that. Or maybe I can make it a little bit safer for me when I'm going wherever. So hopefully that's the case. So just some statistics I wanted to throw at you before we get started. We were just kind of spitballing this as far as some of the common violations that we see on our roads based on traffic stops and crashes. Okay, failing to reduce speed, reduce and control speed, commonly known as a speeding violation. It's the same statute under our state statutes and stuff. But this we typically see with folks that have a crash. Okay, if you've ever been rear-ended or you've ever rear-ended anybody, you probably got a ticket for this in most cases. And it just goes hand in hand. There's not a speed associated with it. What the courts say is that you have to always be in control of your car. And if somebody starts and stops suddenly and you've just now gone too fast and now you just bump them in the back, that's a failure to reduce and control your speed. And that's how the courts look at that. Okay, so we'll talk about some strategies on avoiding that happening. Speeding, we all know. You guys see that all the time on our roads. Speeding is just out of control. It's really scary. It scares us.
Business is always good out there for us.
Yeah.
They're flying.
Anybody been stopped by a motor officer?
Hopefully it was me. You enjoyed your experience.
I'm not a motor officer though. Was it a motorcycle?
I don't know, it was on this side of town, I guess.
Did I give you a break?
Hmm?
Did I give you a break?
Yeah, they
Okay.
did.
Oh, then it was not a motor officer. We have to have our heart and our
It was me.
soul
It was me then.
before we get on the motorcycle. I wanted to add on all of these, if you look about it and we think specifically to our elderly population, what slows down with us when we get older, and I know it's happened to me, is our reaction time, right? So we kind of, if you interject that into all of these, it's taking you longer to respond to a red light. And a side note, the older drivers typically are much safer. They've got some life experience, and a lot of the retired folks are not in a rush. They're enjoying life, all that other stuff. But what is being affected by the age is the reaction time. And then you see that, whereas the younger people, all this is just impatience and taking risks and things like that. So you guys typically, we see, are great drivers, but your reaction time's slowing down.
I feel like somebody over here is like, I feel the need for speed.
Actually, every once in a while, when I pull up somebody in their 80s and they were speeding, I'm pretty impressed. They're really, and they are high level functioning and just go, go, go. But I'm sure they were like that their whole life. I don't know.
Probably. And the speeds are just out of control. I mean, as hard as we try to combat that, and I know if you guys are on the road for any period of time, you see it. Both Ed and myself have stopped people on our surface streets in town at people doing well over 100 miles an hour.
Oh my God.
And I know that shocks some people, and it's sad, and it is, and we take it very seriously. Some people, go, well, I've heard people say, Ed is so hard on people. The same thing I've heard it about myself at times.
Are you saying 100 miles on city streets?
On the city streets.
118 is my record on Houghton Road.
Mhm.
118. And triple digits all the time.
Well, how about Colb Road? It's not a very fast road, but I like to sit in different parts of Colb Road, and I've had people well over 100. And oh no, during the day, latter part of the day, at night as well, but certainly during the day.
Motorcycles are doing that.
Yeah, we have a big problem with.
Yeah, that's a unique problem that the city is trying to find a way to combat, and that's a little bit beyond our level because people on motorcycles don't like to stop for the police, and we're not allowed to pursue them for many different good reasons. So they know that, and they kind of do their thing. But the cars, we get stopped most of the time.
So another thing I wanted to add to this, if you think about, I was talking reaction time and how that slows down. Our whole thing with motors and traffic enforcement and why we have speed limits is predictability out on the roadway. So I always talk to these people that are doing 100 miles an hour. I say, you're not just driving for yourself. You're driving for all the other people, the elderly, the new kid who just learned how to drive. And so there's a predictability about the movements out on the roadway that makes everybody safe. By that, I mean, if you're driving down the road and you look in your side mirror and you see a car way back there, and now you make the decision to make a lane change. Well, if that guy's doing 118 miles an hour, you're going to pull right into them. So that's where we see a lot of the problems with older drivers and things like that, where it's really not fair to them because that person who's doing the 118 is causing the problem. So that's where our enforcement efforts kind of try to keep them down and in check.
Any questions so far? No?
Well, I have a question.
Sure.
See, my car tells me all sorts of things, beeps at me. Has that helped at all?
I think that's an individual thing, and I think it absolutely has helped a lot of folks in different circumstances. I know the backup cameras and those little alarms, they're fantastic because you can kind of have some eyes and knowing what's behind you.
My car, I can program it so that I stay 1, 2, 3 car lengths behind me.
Mhm.
It just raised. It tells me everything.
Right. And those are, and just to remind everybody, that's great. The technology is really evolving and it's great tools, but we have to be aware of, now, what if it fails? Or what if we're using a different car? Maybe the car goes down for some reason, they give you a loaner car. You have to remember that we may not have that technology in another car that you're driving. So you just have to be cognizant of that. But yeah, those are great tools. I completely agree. We've come a long way with that stuff. So.
Well, I'm having difficulty with my computer because they keep changing everything.
Updating it.
Mhm.
And I have a 2010 car.
Yeah.
And I'm scared to get a new car.
Because of technology, yeah. You're gonna need a grandchild or somebody to figure out all that stuff.
Yeah.
With all the technology. And good point, be familiar with your vehicle before you go out on the roadway. You make sure that the headlights come on. They're not on auto or they're not on auto. Those are all safety considerations that you have to be aware of.
I didn't put that on here, but that's another big one. I'm glad you hit on it. Often people get confused because of the computer technology, what auto means. And so often at times, a lot of the cars, and people don't realize, especially when they rent newer cars, the running lights, the daytime lights that are on all the time will come on. So you can see in front of you if you're driving at night, not very well, but you can see a little bit. Often at times folks think that the headlights are on, but they're not. So there's no other cars, there's no lights on the rear of the car. There's no, none of the amber lights, none of the tail lights. So we stop a lot of people who are like, hey, you don't have any lights on? They're like, I'm pretty sure I can see the lights. It's only the daytime running lights. So I'll hit on it when we get to the end of the program. I don't remember if it's AAA or AARP. One of those, maybe both, talk about a program for older folks with the newer technology. And I think they have a couple classes that they can go over all of these different features, how they work, and how you can use them in your cars and stuff in the event that you have a newer car. So good stuff to be familiar with. Unsafe turns is another one. I stop a lot of older folks. That's probably a real common one for me when I stop. I'll stop the car because they're making some sort of a weird turn or turning where they're not supposed to, making a right turn or a left turn where it says you clearly can't do that, or making a U-turn. And we'll talk about some of the reasons why we see that with some of the older folks, but that's a real common one that we find. The red light violations, Ed started to hit on that. It has to do with just the ability, a couple of different things. Your reaction time and your ability to negotiate. Okay, that light is now phasing from green to yellow to red, and that timing just gets off. And I think that's just one of the things as we get a little bit older. I know Ed hit on. I see the same things. Sometimes I notice my reaction time is a little bit slower than when I was a little bit younger. So I have no doubt that as we get older, that's one of the things that we run into. So we have some red light violations where we'll have a crash or we won't have a crash. We'll see some person will tell me, "Hey, I was looking at it. I thought it was still yellow." Okay, we'll talk about some strategies to get around those. And then distracted driving. And you might know this better. Do you see that a whole lot with older folks?
No, distracted driving. So we have a law with anything electronic, basically, that can send messages in your hand or on your person. So everybody sees the person, with the phone up to their ear. That's our distracted driving law. It's nothing to do with being on the phone, but having something electronic in your hand. I'd say you guys are very good with that. If everybody is not familiar, if you have a holder in your car and you can put the cell phone there, you can see it. You can actually manipulate that. Not the smartest thing, but it's nothing against the law to manipulate that. It's considered basically part of the dash of the vehicle, just as you would change the radio station. But you need to have that technology. You need to have that tool in your car so you don't have the the temptation to grab your phone and somebody called and now you want to pick it up. You can just touch it and answer it. So that's something I would highly recommend you getting.
Yeah, absolutely.
Have it on Bluetooth. Yes, ma'am.
I'm not using the GPS, I have my phone in my lap, is that illegal?
That is illegal, yes.
Where would I put it, on the seat?
So
If I don't have a holder.
Walmart or Amazon, or they have holders that either attach to your windshield, attach to your dash, into your vent, that you can hang the phone on that. Now, before you take off, you connect it to your Bluetooth. If you don't have Bluetooth, just go off the phone. If the phone rings, you can answer it. You can just touch it, and then it'll come over on the speaker. And that's the best way. It's less distracting, and it is not illegal to handle it in that fashion.
Is it illegal to have it on the seat next?
No, but I would caution you, because now you're taking your focus from here down to over here instead of up in the dash. And so that's a quicker transition for reaction time, things like that.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure we clarified that. So if it is on the seat, and you can imagine you're driving on the car and now you're looking over and what's going on in front of you. When we talk about driving, we like to break miles per hour into feet per second, because that correlates to a person's ability. Having an average reactionary time for people to come to stops and hit brakes and things like that. If somebody's doing 40 miles an hour, it's basically about 60 feet per second. That's a big distance.
So I'm sorry to interrupt, but when we ride a motorcycle, we were always talking about where our head and eyes go. Where you're looking is where you go, and that translates. So you're riding, you look down like this, and then we start drifting off. Same thing in a car. If you're looking down over here, that distraction, you may not be able to stay in your lane. That's where we see the collisions happening.
So the less distractions, the better. And again, I don't see it a whole lot with older folks. Sometimes that same scenario where we have something on the seats or we look down. Historically, you guys will chuckle out of this because this is the crowd that can relate to it. We used to have this thing called newspapers, like actual newspapers. And I can't tell you how many times I would come down the road and see somebody in their car and they're trying to drive with a knee and look at the newspaper. I don't know, thanks to technology now, everybody just gets on a phone, but.
And that's a good thing with the GPS, and I think we'll cover it later, but when we have a problem, they're not good at finding a route around, let's say, a collision or a detour. The GPS is great for that. So I would highly recommend that. And if you're not comfortable with it, ask somebody who is, and they'll set you up.
And if anybody's getting a newer car, I think you can get that incorporated. It does cost a little bit more, but it's a whole lot safer to have that in there. And it'll reroute you and stuff, just like Ed said, if there's a crash or something. So it's really nice. Some of the statistics I took from AAA. So by 2030, we're in 2025, so another 5 years, there will be more than 70 million people aged 65 or older, and approximately 85 to 90% of them will be licensed to drive. So because we're aging so much better, okay, we're seeing people drive a lot later into their elderly lives, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. But what we have to recognize is some of the challenges as we get older, okay? And then unfortunately, we're all subject to it at some point. So everybody's gonna be a little bit different. So seniors are outliving their ability to drive safely by an average of 7 to 10 years. For the first time in history, we must plan for our driving retirement just as we plan for our financial retirement. Okay, and I think that's a really good quote by AAA. Okay, a lot of us during the course of our lives, we try to plan financially so that we're in a good place when we do retire. We have to do the same thing when we're driving. And some of the slides that we'll talk about will highlight why that is important.
Well, about 7 to 10 years or less, we'll have self-driving cars.
We
We have some stories about those.
Yeah.
We're not there yet.
They'll get better.
It will absolutely get better. Have you looked at your license and taken a look at when your license expires? It's in Arizona, it's a long time.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think we need to have a little personal accountability to say, hey, maybe every 2 years I should self-evaluate and say, mine says 2036, and yeah, that's kind of far away. And then I don't know what yours says, but you need to start looking at that, because we don't do retests typically until that expires. And we'll talk about a retest if you have a family member who you think should not be driving. There are avenues that you can go through MED to possibly have their license taken away. But that opens up another can of worms for enforcement, and how do you keep that person from driving? We've all dealt with situations where we've had to take keys away and drive somebody home because they didn't know where they were, they shouldn't be driving, and their family members tell us, we try to get them to stop driving, he just will not. So
that's an interesting point. I'll tell you a little side story. So probably a couple months ago now, I'm coming up Wilmot, and I see this car in front of me, and it's in the right lane, and I see cars kind of backing up, and I'm kind of zooming around it. So as I catch up to it, I'm looking at it, and I see the car that's kind of going partially into the middle lane and then back in, and we're doing like 15 miles under the speed limit. It's only 40 over there, so we're doing like 25. And I'm like, what the heck is going on with this? This is an impaired driver. And it's like 11:30 in the morning. I'm like, wow, okay, I guess I'm gonna.
it happens.
And it does happen all the time. So I was not really surprised by it, but I'm like, okay, well, here we go. So we get up to the side street. I activate my lights. The car kind of slowly makes this wide turn into the side street, and this older gentleman hops out of the car, and I'm looking at him, and it turns out he's 92, fully dressed in very nice clothes and everything like this, and he gets out and he goes, "Did I do something wrong?" And I look at him and go, "This isn't an impaired driver. This is just an older gentleman that really needs not to be driving." So once I get him stopped, I realize his plates are expired. He doesn't have any insurance on the car. His license is suspended for exactly what Officer Schwinn was just alluding to. There is a form when we encounter folks like this, where the driving is really obvious that they are a danger to everybody, that we can submit to motor vehicle. And then motor vehicle will look at it, read it, and then send the person a notice saying, hey, you have a month or 2 months to come down to motor vehicle, take another test, and if you do okay, your license is good, and if not, we're gonna have to take your license away. If you don't, if you just ignore it, they suspend your license, and that's what they did with him. Somebody else had submitted him already. So, question?
Can't you just take away the car?
Well, so this is what I did. So, people get confused as far as, why we write tickets, okay? And you guys are a little bit older, so maybe you guys recognize this already. When we write tickets, we give somebody a ticket. First thing people say, you're just trying to pad your job. That's we pay. The fines for tickets here locally don't go to the city of Tucson. It's a very small percent. It's like 3%.
It's small.
Yeah, it's like 2 or 3% of the fine actually stays in the city. The rest of it goes to Phoenix, goes into a state highway fund. So it's really not, the purpose of tickets aren't to cause, financial burden to people. It's to change behavior. That's what we try to do. We try to change people's behavior because nobody wants to get a ticket. Nobody wants to sit through that traffic class if they choose to do that.
They're expensive.
Yeah, so it's to change behavior. So I'm looking at this older gentleman and I stop and I say, hey, what's going on? And he says, well, I had to get to the church. I was picking up some food to bring home to the family and stuff like that. And he was adorable. So, I got a hold of his son and he goes, is he driving again? I'm like, yeah. He said, we disabled his car a number of months ago on him. And he called some service to come fix the car. He goes, my car's not working. You come fix it. Somebody came to the house and fixed his car. Furthermore, the son gets there and he goes, he looks pretty good for 92. I said, I hope I look that good for 92 because he really didn't look like he was 92. I had to do the math. I'm like, 92. And the son says, yeah, he looks pretty good, doesn't he? He was in hospice about a week and a half before this because he had major heart blockage, blah, blah, blah. And they did surgery on him. They said, it's not going to turn out very favorable. Had hospice at the house and stuff. And about a week later, hospice left and he was rebounding. Instead of having a very, very small percentage of efficiency with his cardiovascular system, it was now at like 70%. So he was back, dressed up, out doing things. He was just nonstop, but adorable. So he didn't get any tickets or anything like that. I mean, there was nothing I was going to do that was going to change his behavior except encourage his family. Like, you guys really need to take the wheels off the car. I don't know.
Yeah.
So.
That wasn't my question. The ticket wasn't my question.
Okay.
Can't you take the car? Like, tow the car and have the car.
Yeah,
So that's-
under some very limited circumstances do I get to take the car.
It's their property, and obviously with our resources, we can't babysit somebody 24/7. I'm dealing with the personal responsibility comes back to that person, obviously. We talk about impairment to slice degree, all our DUI laws, right? So if you're impaired to the slice degree by alcohol, drugs, combination, you'd be arrested and we can take you off the road. But nothing in the law says it's illegal to drive while impaired to slice degree because of your age or being tired or all those other things. So personal accountability now comes into play where you say, hey, I wouldn't put my family members or me in harm's way by drinking and driving, right? So at some point, like my dad, he's going to need to look at himself and say, hey, am I causing the community more harm than good? And step up and say, I need to stop driving. So
the way around it is encourage the family. Like, hey, we need to get this car. And the son came, took the car and
That's
stuff.
what my brother did with my dad.
Mhm.
My brother is a mechanic and just said, Dad, there's something wrong with your car. I'm going to take it into the shop.
Mhm.
And then it was in the shop
Mhm.
for the rest of my
For the
dad's
rest of
life.
we can't do that. You
Yeah.
guys can do that.
Yeah.
So,
And that's where the families, for those of us that are watching via the video and stuff, that's certainly a recommendation for some of the family from, some of the kids and stuff that have older folks that are just insistent on driving when maybe they need not to. You see that, so. Senior drivers are among the safest drivers on the road and often reduce the risk of injury by wearing safety seatbelts, not drinking and driving, and by observing the speed limits. That we know. Okay, I totally agree with that from AAA. They've documented it statistically, absolutely 100%. That lends a little bit back towards that original concept that I told you about because we have so many other different people on the road. That's where we run into this perfect storm. However, seniors are more likely to be injured or killed in a crash due to age-related fragility. Okay, I think everybody here can agree that we have a lot more aches and pains than we did when we were younger in most cases. It doesn't take much for us to break things. I mean, something as simple as, when you're younger, you run around, you fall down, you get back up, you keep going. But as we get older, that's not the case. I mean, a very simple stumble fall, we break a hip, we break an arm, we break fingers, all of that happens. That's the same thing in a car crash. As we get older, we add all of the different medical challenges that we encounter. a simple crash. We take those really, really seriously when we have some of the older folks involved, because, I mean, they've turned out to be fatal crashes. A crash that we see all the time. 9 times out of 10, people exchange information, they go about their way. But there's that one time where we have somebody that's much older, maybe have some medical things going on, and a simple crash can turn out to be fatal. So those are the things that we need to really, truly consider on our own in some of these cases.
See that numerous times, left turns at an intersection. I see the nice old couple that were headed to dinner, and usually the fella's driving because he's stubborn, right? And the lady's sitting in the passenger seat, and then he makes a left turn in front of a car coming through the intersection on the right of way, and then his wife takes the brunt of that impact. And I've seen so many fatals that way, and it's a horrible thing to see. So just kind of keep in the back of your mind that maybe if we eliminate the driving, somebody else can drive, be a little safer. We won't put our loved ones in harm's way.
I'm going to give you some suggestions, even as we get older, some suggestions for those scenarios that should help you significantly, our folks at home that are watching and stuff. The exception of teenagers, obviously teenagers are young and invincible. Seniors have the highest crash death rate per mile driven. We age, our ability to drive is affected by natural changes to our bodies. That's a no-brainer. Okay. Eyes change, that's a big one. Vision changes, cataracts, vision reduces. We get those halos at night. All things to consider. So they can all affect.
Diabetes, my dad has neuropathy, and I've noticed, I call it the old man shuffle, where he can't feel the ground as well as he used to, and that translates to him not using the brake and the accelerator properly. He's having a hard time with that. So something to think about.
Hearing, obviously our hearing doesn't normally get better, it only decreases.
Right.
That can certainly, obviously, affect us with hearing sirens, hearing emergency vehicles, hearing another car hitting their horn because there's an emergency ahead, something to that effect. Joints and muscles, they don't work the same. I'm sure everybody here will agree with that, me included. I swore, I don't know, not that long ago that I wasn't going to get older and I wasn't going to this, and yeah, it catches up with you. And I wake up today and it takes me a minute to get moving sometimes.
I was going to say, it catches up. I thought it was
Everybody.
happened to me, but I'm no longer 25.
I tell the story to my parents. I remember my dad different times as he got older and stuff. And he's not here anymore, but as he got older, he complained about his hip and stuff. I'm like, oh, come on, Dad, what are you talking about? How? But as we get older, we all fall prey to it.
Remember, we're talking about aging in our, that's a good thing. I mean, to be around this long, and that's not something to be down on yourself about. I hope to get old and be a pain to my kids like my parents are to me. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it can be good. I have a great aunt now, and she's just getting ready to hit 97, and she still gets around. She only just recently stopped driving.
With pot legalized, and this isn't directly
Sure.
aimed at older people, what does that do to your driving ability?
Makes it bad. That's my forte. That's my forte.
Nothing.
So historically, those of us that are marijuana smokers, those of you that are marijuana smokers, historically we look back in the day when you'd smoke a joint and get a little high and people get a little buzzed. Marijuana, leafy marijuana, years ago before it ever became legalized in this big thing, about 2% THC, 2 to 3% THC is what was in leafy marijuana. That's what people smoked, and they got a little buzz from it, and life was good and stuff like that. Times have changed, and now we have legalization. And the legalized marijuana, we don't see leafy marijuana a whole lot anymore. Now everything is in the form of oils and waxes.
Vapes.
The vapes, the THC levels that we see in those are pushing upwards of 95, 98% THC. Night and day from the historic marijuana smokers that, some of the old, as we would call them, stoners and stuff. They'd get a buzz and it was a very small amount of THC in it. Now it's through the roof. Marijuana, everybody says, well, I smoke marijuana. It slows me down. I drive better. It's a perception. It affects a person's perception. Not only does it increase your blood pressure and your heart rate, but your perception, your time perception is all distorted. So is it good under certain medical conditions for folks? You have a medical condition and we get prescriptions for it and we use it? Absolutely. Do I recommend driving with that in your system? Absolutely not.
So
Absolutely
people
not.
forget how long marijuana can impair you. We talk about physical impairment and then we talk about mental impairment. The mental impairment, some studies are showing up to 24 hours of possible impairment due to that. And we see that when we do the field sobriety test. Usually those weed smokers are pretty good with the mechanical and the balance things, but they can't remember how many steps I told them to take. They can't remember how I want them to turn. So if you correlate that back to driving a vehicle, hey, how far back should I start pressing my brake for the red light? And typically I see the weed smokers going very, very fast. The high speeds are the ones I'm seeing on the crashes because their perception is just altered. It's not what alcohol is, and we're having a big problem with that. Everybody says, well, it's legal, it's natural, and we're having a hard time with all the
If it's
collisions.
legal, how do you arrest somebody for?
Impairment of the slightest degree is what we go by, so it's all the same.
Yeah,
standard.
alcohol and drugs, prescription medication.
Mhm.
Those of us that have prescription medication, those fall subject to DUI violations. If you are impaired to this, what the law says in Arizona is if you're impaired to the slightest degree, whatever that might be, by alcohol, drugs, any vapor releasing substance, prescription medications, that's a DUI offense. Now there's additional charges for high alcohol levels. There's an additional charge if it's no alcohol, maybe it's marijuana.
Illicit drug or something.
People get confused because I teach this a lot. People get confused and they say, I'll ask them, is it illegal to drink alcohol and then go drive a car? And everybody goes, absolutely.
Hello?
Well, it's not. You're chuckling, but it's not illegal for me to go have a beer and then get in my car and drive. It's good. Not smart. Don't misunderstand what I'm saying. Not smart. But it's not illegal for me to do that. It only becomes illegal if that beer impairs me to the slightest degree. The reason why, and we actually have a really good law, it's one of the few things the state does well in that statute, okay, because everybody's affected differently. If I have somebody that doesn't drink any alcohol at all, and I say, hey, this was a great class, let's go do a shot right now and celebrate this. For those people that never drink, they're probably going to have a really hard time functioning after just one drink, as opposed to the person that drinks sociably on a regular basis that can handle their alcohol a little bit better. That's why the law is written that way. It's the same thing with marijuana. No, it's not illegal to smoke marijuana at home. We don't have recreational marijuana here. It's only, you can go buy it, go home and smoke it all you want. And if it doesn't impair you to the slightest degree, we could argue it probably will. But if we can't show impairment to the slightest degree when you're driving, then it's not illegal. It only becomes illegal if we can show the impairment.
And remember when you get the new prescription and on the side of the bottle it says this may cause dizziness and make sure you know how this makes you feel before you get in the vehicle. We come across that pretty frequently. I just got a new medication from my doctor and guess what? They just crashed into 3 parked cars and we're sitting there having a conversation. They didn't really think they were going to be impaired, but they certainly were. So.
Well, they have some of the older folks too, and it's certainly a smaller percentage, but some of the older folks that have a variety of medical conditions. So now we start having all kinds of different medications. And despite the doctors and despite the pharmacies, they don't always get it right. Certain medications don't work well with other medications. So now we start to see this impairment. So something to be cognizant on a lot. We don't see it with usually like the blood pressure medications and stuff like that. You know, unless it's new for somebody and they have that moment where they kind of get dizzy or something like that. But those are the normal common ones for cholesterol and blood pressure and stuff. We don't usually see that with regards to DUIs.
The last thing on the sleep disorder.
Yes.
I was sitting working my Sudoku puzzle Sunday morning,
Mm-hmm.
like I always do, and the chair threw me out. I had fallen asleep and didn't know it. In the morning, after a full night's sleep, What kind of sleep disorders do you tend to see? What can people do?
Don't see it a whole lot, but we do run into, one of the big things today are the CPAPs. A lot of people use CPAPs. And I was going to throw my friend under the bus, but we both use one. I just have a way that I don't see my strap marks sometimes.
Don't ask them what.
But it's a much
technique is.
more common way of dealing with sleep apneas and stuff like that. Or folks, for some reason, they just have a day where they don't get their normal amount of sleep. And maybe they're a little bit run down.
Well, what about Tylenol PM or Aleve PM? And I know I use
Yeah.
them.
Or if you have maybe a little cold and maybe you supplement with an over-the-counter.
How about just being under stress?
Absolutely.
Not illegal though. So
Yeah.
I pull people over, weaving down the road, and it's the nurse who just got off a 12-hour shift.
Right.
Or pulled the double, and that's not illegal to be impaired that way, obviously with any medication, that you could be arrested for that.
I don't want you guys to focus in as much on maybe the illegal aspect of it, because I don't see it a whole lot with older folks. You doing things illegally per se, maybe making mistakes which make it illegal. But things like that are certainly things that we're going to be cognizant of. As far as, maybe I didn't get enough sleep, or now that you've encountered that, being aware, what was it I doing that day that caused it? Is it something medical going on, or was it just a weird and stressful day?
Well, what a stressful day.
Well, there you go. So there's your answer.
And I got, maybe it was just that one day, that the next morning, that, I guess it was yesterday. I mimicked it and did all the same things, except I sat on the couch instead of a chair.
Well, vertigo, anybody ever have vertigo and it comes up and spins you out of a chair? Did
Yeah.
you miss? Yeah.
Yeah.
Happens all the time.
I don't know, let me throw it out to you guys. Those of you a little bit older, do you find that as you've aged that it's a little bit harder to get good sleep? No? No? I think some people do and some people don't, but it's just one of those ones.
My problem, I one time fell asleep in the carpet.
Yeah, certainly something to consider, even our folks at home, so.
Yeah.
Vision changes, no brainer. As we get older, our eyes change. All of these different medical conditions that you guys may have encountered from your doctors and stuff. And for those of you that are going to an optometrist on a regular basis, those are all good things because they can tell you, do we have some glaucoma? Do we have, problems with our night vision? There's so many different things, and they would be a good gauge on that. One of the interesting things, and I don't think this is a no-brainer as far as a lot of this stuff. Even dry eye syndrome can cause some problems because it gives you that fogginess when you're driving.
I wanted to touch on like driving at night. There are some restrictions in Arizona where they'll indicate on the person's license that they're only a daytime driver. So that's another resource if you have people that don't drive well at night and you think they might crash into something, that's something you can petition MVD about. Change that.
Obviously, glaucoma, optic nerve disorders and stuff all can affect the way we drive and our vision. Many times there's no warning signs. In the glaucoma, you can kind of see those floaters in there. I had something going on with my pressures and stuff. And so I seem to be fine to my doctor. And he goes, well, your pressures are a little up. You need to be concerned about that because it could be the precursor to a glaucoma or something. So the checkups are the best thing. Blind spots, your peripheral vision, that's another big one. As we age, our peripheral vision starts to decrease. And that's real important because for those of you that are just sitting here in front of me and those are folks at home, if you look out, if you look straight ahead with your head and you look to see how far on the sides you can see, generally if your eyes are pretty healthy, you can kind of see off to the side. But when we get to things like the glaucoma and stuff, our peripheral starts to narrow down. So the example that I give to some of the folks I'm teaching in some of my impaired driving classes, because certain drugs will cause this, if you take your hands and you kind of put them around your eyes like this, and now you try to look left or right, you don't see anything, okay? Sometimes we don't realize that as our peripheral changes. And it's real, real important because now if I have somebody that's coming from my left or coming from my right, I may not see them. And we have some of these crashes, the person says, that car must have been going 100 miles an hour, Officer Schwinn. I looked, I didn't see anything. Well, the car might have been speeding, maybe not that fast, but often at times it's because the peripheral is distorted.
How do you compensate for that? You turn your head more, right? And you look over at that side mirror, and now that changes our point of focus, and we start to drift, and so it's all related.
So a lot of things to consider. Do you have a question?
Well, no, just at our age, the head doesn't turn that easy.
That's the other challenge, right? So our peripheral gets narrowed and we try to look, but you have those aches and joint pains, and it makes it difficult. So it's, it's a vicious battle. Keep hitting left. Diabetic retinopathy, high blood pressure, sugar levels cause damage to blood vessels in the retinas, and it causes vision problems. The folks with diabetes and things like that, they can have issues while they're driving. We need to be aware of that.
My dad's hands are just at his feet. Terrible.
Dad.
Yeah, I
Really
mean,
picking on.
I know. Well, trust me, he knows I would pick on him. So he's good with it.
If
But,
he was here right now, you'd pick
he
on
has
him
a hard
too.
time feeling things and related to driving. He's not doing as well. I was going down Houghton with my wife off duty, and I see my dad coming. He has a big choo-choo train on the side of his truck, so we know it's him, right? And he's coming down, and I see him, and he's driving in the shoulder of the road, going down Houghton.
I hope you
So-
take that ticket.
I wish I could have, that would have been great. But I called him up and I said, hey, we see you on Houghton. He's like, yeah. I said, you're driving in the shoulder. Well, I just like to be out of the, and he makes up this excuse. I'm like, oh my God. Yeah, I'm gonna have to do a retest on him.
Any folks from back east? So you're familiar with the back east stereotypical mentality? It's like, you don't tell me. So,
Very stubborn.
yeah,
Somebody-
he is stubborn. Great guy. He is stubborn. I agree. Cataracts, lenses inside that, all the different eye disorders and stuff. And like I said, if you guys are going to the eye doctors and stuff on a regular basis, that's a huge win, because they can kind of guide you on how to address that. I think the biggest thing I took from this, macular degeneration, all these different things affecting your eyes. So for any of you that are familiar with any of these disorders, something to talk about with your doctor and how that's going to affect your driving. The big thing I wanted to hit on that I took from this is, again, AAA, AARP, they have some programs. Okay, they obviously recommend the exams starting at age 40 yearly. Individuals age 65 or over who are considered high risk for eye disease may be eligible for a medical eye exam, and this is straight from AARP. They may be eligible for no out-of-pocket cost eye exam. So for those of you that maybe have some financial concerns, I would look at the AARP website, and you talk about this program. You might be eligible for that, to get that paid so you could go have that eye exam and have it not cost you anything, because none of that's cheap anymore. So even with insurance, every time I go to the eye doctor, I think it's almost $75 out of pocket just to go and talk to them, and they usually bring me back. Eye Care America, I highlighted here. Eye Care America is the name of the program. So I would look into that and see if that's accessible for anybody here and our folks at home. We can't forget about the common medications we kind of hit on a little bit earlier. Common medications can affect the senior's ability to drive safely. Antidepressants, for those of you that have maybe some anxiety issues, or whatever it is, anything related to sight. We like to give prescriptions for these antidepressants a lot today. That's kind of the medical community's cure-all. Let me give you some antidepressants. And in some cases, they're very beneficial for different situations, but they present enhanced risks when you're driving. Okay, they are definitely, the antidepressants are going to slow you down. So if your reactionary time, because we're a little bit older, is already slow, now we add this, it becomes really slow. Okay.
So most of the antidepressants under normal prescribed dose from your doctor will not impair you. But then you start adding maybe some alcohol, or the mindset of one pill makes me feel good, two is probably going to be better. And that's where we end up seeing some issues. My dad's really good at changing his dosage for personal reasons and my mother's doses because he knows better. The doctor doesn't know what's going on at that moment, but he knows better, so he'll up it or he'll cut it in half. I kind of strongly suggest not to do that, so.
Sleep aid, sometimes if we're having some sleep issues or something, we'll take an occasional sleep aid. Ed hit on this. It wasn't uncommon. Many times I've dealt with some older folks where I smell a little bit of alcohol. I'm like, you been drinking? I just had a glass of wine. Okay, are you taking it? And that probably in itself is not the problem. I'm like, well, do you take any medications? Like, well, yeah, I take boom, 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 boom. I take that with my glass of wine. So certainly things to consider. The sleep aids or anything like the melatonins or the Z-Quells and stuff like that, they're designed to help you sleep.
Good stuff, yeah.
Yeah, they're designed to help you sleep a little.
Anybody diabetic? We have some issues with, you have a pump or you monitor that. My dad has a pump now, which is much better. I highly recommend that for the driving. Sometimes his blood sugar will crash and he wasn't maintaining that properly. We see every once in a while a slump driver or somebody passed out in the middle of an intersection. Usually they're older and a lot of times it's a diabetic issue that we work through. It's a medical issue. It's nothing illegal, but it is dangerous. So.
Quick funny story and we'll move on. I had an elderly lady. She kind of wound up on the curb in the middle of the road, Broadway and Cole. I happened to be close by. They said, "Madonna, you better go. Could be a pair driver." I get over there and walk up to the car. Older lady, and she's still trying to get her car off. I'm like, "Hey, it's okay. We'll get you off the road." And she's probably 86-ish, if I remember correctly. Anyways, so I said, "Are you okay? What happened? You have any medical problems?" No. But the way she's talking to me, I'm thinking, sounds like some dementia stuff, because some of the normal medical questions they'll get into is like, "Do you know what day it is? Do you know where you're at?" And she was way off. I mean, she said, "Yeah, I think it's," she told me the president, she thought it was like Jimmy Carter or something. This is just about a year ago. So I said, I think this is probably some maybe a little dementia or Alzheimer's setting in. So the paramedics came, checked her out. They said her vitals look pretty good. But we're thinking the same thing. So they take her away to the hospital. About a week later, I get to the hospital for an unrelated thing. And nurse comes up to me. She says, "Oh," she goes, "You're the one who sent us that lady." And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" She goes, "The lady that was up on the meet." I said, "Oh, yeah, I remember that." I said, "Oh, my God, what happened? Did she pass?" And she says, "No." She goes, "The medics brought her in here. Shortly after she was here, she crashed out on them." So they do all their life-saving things. They bring her back to life. And about 2 hours later, she had the same episode. So now all the medical staff's going, "Did you give her medicine? Who gave her medicine?" Because she's got some sort of a narcotic on board, because they ended up having to give her a Narcan to make her come back. So they're scratching their heads because everybody's going, "We didn't give her any medication." Well, it turns out she had a fentanyl patch on her body, and they're time released. That, they didn't strip her down to check her, but she had a fentanyl patch that she didn't tell anybody about. Either, somebody gave it to her or whatnot, but she was using it because she had some pain. It's typically for pain relief. But it's an opioid. It's a narcotic. So she, every 2 hours when it would redose her body, she would start to crash out. So tried and true DUI. I didn't catch it, but I thought it was something else going on. So anyways, but things to consider. If you're on a time release type of medication, consider those things. Anti-inflammatory drugs, nearly 3 times more likely to fail a road test. They're anti-inflammatory type things. The Aleve, the Tylenols, certainly not illegal to use. They're not a prescription medication, but they can have effects on your body. Okay, and we tend to see more effects with older folks. So if you're taking those, you're taking the Tylenol or the baby aspirin on a daily basis, just be cognizant of that. We do see some distortion in the driving with folks. And again, it's enough that this is one of the statistics from AARP. Opioids, any of the pain relieving drugs. So you hear about this fentanyl on the streets and stuff like that. Any of the pain relieving drugs that they can prescribe, including fentanyl. Like you can get a prescription for fentanyl. They have a significant effect on people. Okay, and absolutely. the gabapentinoids.
My dad was on gabapentin. I think he was hooked on it, to be honest with you.
You should just brought your dad.
I know, I should have. Would have been great. Yeah, just be aware, hey, my doctor prescribed it, I'm good to take it, and then off he goes. It's for nerve pain, right? And anti-inflammatory stuff for nerves and things like that. How's that gonna affect you driving? That's a concern. So really, I think the overall thing is to remember to kind of plan ahead and think about what you have overall going on.
Last summer, I drove a car and then the headlights had gotten fuzzed over from the sun and stuff. I could barely see where it's going.
Yeah.
I mean, there should be something. You can't see with those things.
Yeah, no, I agree. I totally agree. Antibiotics, certain antibiotics, if you're taking a new antibiotic, that can have a combination effect on maybe some of the regular medicines you're taking, or you might not take any medications, now get an antibiotic for some reason. It can have an effect on you as we get older, causing dizziness and stuff like that. And any of the antihistamines for any of the breathing stuff, that's going to typically make you a little bit more drowsy. Okay.
And then add it to what you're normally under. So it's a bad windy day and everything's kicking up, so you're going to take an antihistamine on top of everything else you're using. It will have an additive effect, maybe more than what you expected.
I remember I was talking to my mom one day. She was like, "Yeah, I got this bad rash. I was outside doing stuff. She's gonna take a little bit of Benadryl, blah blah blah." I kept calling. I'm like, "Oh my God, I can't get her with that." I sent somebody over the house. Yeah, she went to sleep. She took a little nap for like 3 hours because the Benadryl just knocked her out.
Which is fine if you're in bed, but if you're driving the car, probably that.
So the $1 million question, and this is for some of our family members that are watching here today, are going to watch it down the road. How do you know when to take the keys and give them up? There's a variety of different online screenings through AARP and AAA. You guys have handouts for this stuff, but if you go to those websites, they have a lot of resources on there to take some different classes and take some assessments of yourself to see where you fit in. Department of Motor Vehicle, and we have a variety of different classes, and it's through these guys as well. Just some updates on rules of the road and things of that nature. Real good things to consider.
Like this.
It should be, yeah. Yeah, that's part of the PowerPoint.
I had a class that I did with a nursing home, and a lot of the problems were when you need to get to this doctor's appointment. I know the path of travel for that. The problem we're seeing is if something happened that messed up with their route, how do I get around that? And then people are getting confused. We see more with the elderly drivers going the wrong way on a one-way street or left of center because I got out of position. I don't know my routine. And so now I need to go there, which can get dangerous if we have the road blocked off for an emergency, things like that. So self-assessment, I think, is the big thing as far as you and driving and when you need to stop. Plan ahead. I don't know if you have anybody that can help you with driving and maybe carpool with somebody that that's a little younger. These are all things we're encouraging my parents to do, to reach out to us. And it's, in my opinion, selfish to call that person up that day and say, hey, I need to go. I have this doctor's appointment. Well, you know about those doctor's appointments. Make that connection early when you know that you're going to need help with driving. And your family members or other people. Suntran is free. They've got Uber, they've got Lyft.
Suntran right now is free.
Yeah.
There's also Eastside Volunteer Services. There's a whole community of people that drive older people.
Okay.
Everybody heard that?
I can't remember, it's through Pima Council on Aging.
PCOA.
Okay.
Yeah. So a lot of resources, and be smart about it. Do you know there's a lot of delivery services for groceries and medications and almost anything you need, you can get delivered to your house. And we have been encouraging my parents who live up on a mountain area up in Corona, they'll deliver there. He doesn't have to go out and drive at 8 o'clock at night. You go online and connect up with that and they'll deliver it for you. A lot of resources out there. I encourage everybody to do that. If you're nervous about driving or having some difficulty or family members having difficulty, plan ahead. There's a lot of stuff out there and you don't have to put yourself in harm's way and enjoy a ride over to the grocery store.
That's a really good point, and that's a really, really tough thing to self-reflect on sometimes. Is it safe or is it safer for everybody else? I'm sure many of you have loved ones. You just think about the heartbreak if they were to lose any one of you because of one of these crashes that maybe could have been avoided or should have been avoided because of the driving issues and stuff like that. I put these in your PowerPoint, so I'm not going to waste a whole lot of time. Smart Driver Online course was one I saw that I thought would be applicable to these topics. Driver Safety Virtual Workshops. So those of you that have access to computers, they look like really good programs. The light blue on here, the underline, is the name of the class. It's great that we have some of the local resources as far as delivery and stuff like that and giving people a ride. It's a hard decision to make, but sometimes we have to take advantage of that stuff and maybe get there safer. AAA Roadwise Driver Senior Defensive Driving Program is an online course designed to positively affect driving behavior. One of the bigger things I saw with this is sometimes you can get a reduction on your insurance for taking these courses. So maybe it's worth something looking into. Maybe you're not to that point where you're not a safe driver or that you really need to change much. But if you take one of these classes, there's a good chance maybe your insurance company gives you a little bit of a discount. Okay. Evolving technology, we hit on it earlier, I think. So many things have changed with the new cars and stuff like that. The dealerships are usually pretty good with sitting down with you, taking some time and going over those things. And then there's a whole bunch of online resources.
I have trouble figuring out my car.
Okay.
And the little book in the glove compartment's useless.
It
But
is.
YouTube,
Yeah.
you put in your cards, the year, everything, and YouTube is great.
I know,
That
yeah.
guy from the
YouTube has
dealership is right in the
Yeah.
house.
It's amazing how that's changed online. Again, this crowd here, I can say, I remember growing up and having to look at an encyclopedia to do reports and stuff like that. But you mentioned that now, that phone books and phone booths, and people look at you like, what? But, there was a time, but there's good and bad to everything. But some of the technologies, I got to admit, it's pretty cool to just go, oh, is that how I do that? So take advantage of that technology. If you're technologically, that word right there. If you're challenged in that respect, because I know a little bit, I'm certainly no wizard at it. There are a lot of resources to help you guys if you go to the libraries. And I'm sure there's a lot of resources here within TMC and stuff like that that can help you get up to speed, at least basically, with some of the computer technology and stuff. You don't have to be a whiz to do any of this stuff. It's pretty straightforward. So, but there's a lot of resources to help with that. Advocating additional resources through AAA is designed for older folks and their families to help navigate getting older and driving. Kind of highlights what we're talking about here today. Again, that's in your handout, so take advantage of that. It's an online resource. It can help you and your family members maybe sit down and go through that and navigate some of that. Roadwise Driver, that was the one earlier. Ed hit on this a whole lot. Plan your route. That's key. We get a lot of folks that they don't plan ahead and they get real confused.
How do you keep up with what's happening on the roads? I was going to the airport. I've been going to the airport for
Real
20
quick,
years.
can you take that question?
Okay.
Just so
Okay.
we're running along.
Yep.
Short on time.
Maintain a safe distance. Okay. Give yourself extra room. That speed demon wants to come racing past, let him race past you. Let him race past you, cut in front of you. If you have enough room, you should be in a good place for that. Look ahead. I remember that as a brand new driver. My dad always said, don't look at your car, look ahead. Watch what's going on in front of you. See if there's, traffic's backing up for some reason or there's an emergency ahead, and that allows you enough time to react to that stuff. So make sure you're looking ahead. Be aware of the intersections. Intersections are just, they're different here.
Left turners are bad, so when you're going straight through an intersection, you should be prepared for somebody turning left in front of you. So change your vehicle speed, or maybe even the lane. With motorcycle riding, we want to stay out of that left lane because somebody's going to make that left turn in front of you. If you're in the center or the right lane, it's going to give you a little bit more reaction times.
Don't think we have a problem with this, wearing your seatbelt. Most of the older folks that I deal with all are wearing seatbelts. Limit your distractions. We talked about that. Cell phones are the big culprit. Consider a car fit exam. Again, AAA provides that. They have a system where they'll do an evaluation on your car, take a look at it and see some of the features on there, and maybe talk to you about those features as well. Defensive driving courses, really good thing. You can take that voluntarily through the Department of Motor Vehicle. For those of you that haven't gone through any of the new laws and updates and rules of the road for many years, so much has changed. It's very informational to kind of look through that. And again, that one too, there's insurance discounts that are possible as a result of that.
Is that my dad's slide?
Yeah, we're going back to
Right there.
Tripping down the lanes, making sudden lane changes, ignoring stop signs or traffic signals, braking or stopping suddenly and accelerating suddenly. Common behaviors we see from elderly and younger. Older folks, usually there's reasons for this because our reactions are slower, our perception is distorted, eyesight is not as good, we're not hearing the same, versus the younger folks that are just in a hurry and zoom. I don't care about the time sign.
One's medical, the other one's a conscious decision to drive that way.
Just some recommendations as we finish up here. Driving the right lane. I don't know if most people don't recognize this. I stop a lot of people. I don't usually write tickets a whole lot for it, but I do try to educate people. Arizona's a drive right state. You're supposed to drive in the right lane, the rightmost lane. Okay? Unless you're passing somebody, typically, that's when we move over to the left lane, we pass and we move back to the right. Okay? It's okay to drive. If we have 3 lanes, you're driving in that middle lane. But remember, passing is supposed to be done on the left. We're not supposed to pass cars on the right. Okay, presents a lot of challenges because you can't see as well when you're looking out your right side mirror on the right side of the car. So Arizona is a drive right state. Try to drive in that right lane when possible. Drive the speed limit, no brainer. Don't cross multiple lanes if possible. Okay, and if you have to cross over multiple lanes, do it quickly but consciously, aware of the other vehicles that are there and coming up from behind you. Never pull into the center universal turn lane. That universal turn lane, we see a lot of people that like to pull out of the side street, pull into that lane and wait to try and merge in. It's illegal. You can't do that. That's not what it's designed for. So, and it becomes very dangerous. I know in some aspects it seems like it would be safer. It's
What
dangerous.
does that mean, what you just described?
The center universal turn lane. So when you're coming down the road, you know how we have that center lane that's got 2 lines on both sides and it's got broken lines in the middle. It's designed for you to pull into to make a left turn. Okay, it's called the universal left turn lane. That's what it's designed for. A lot of people will come out from a side street and pull into it and then just wait there to get into the road. Can't do that.
I'd like to add to that. So if you're trying to get onto the roadway and you're coming from a private driveway and you want to go left, and now you're going to have to cross 1, 2, 3, and then the universal left turn lane and then go the other direction. Our suggestion is never trust anybody who stopped and waves you through. You've seen that scenario and you can't see the next lane, somebody coming through. You're going to be held responsible for that. Be failure to yield to from a private drive. Make a right turn and then go somewhere where you can then make a legal U-turn. It's going to be a lot safer that way. Okay.
Last thing I'll add to that, and that concludes our program, aside from any questions, is I always recommend to people, everybody wants to make that left turn because they got to go left. And it's just so dangerous. I'll tell you, if we banned all of our left turns and said it was illegal, we can never make a left turn no matter where, we would have such a reduction in crashes because it's just such an unsafe maneuver when it was just as easy to make a right turn, go down the road, and make a U-turn and come back. So I think probably for me, that would be my biggest thing for everybody here and that's watching this. Take that extra few seconds, a minute, make a right turn, go down the road, make a U-turn and come back. I promise you.
Yellow arrow. You got the yellow arrow. I mean, the green.
The other green arrow, at an intersection, that's different. Yeah, at an intersection, that's different. I'm talking about coming out of a private drive or coming out of the stores or your house, you know, and you have to come across the lanes to make a left turn. Just, we have so many crashes from people, and it's that one that says fair to yield.
Well, I see from back east, they have the jug handles. So you have to go off to the side of the road and then it'll dump you and make a left turn at an intersection. So that alleviates those cross-traffic situations where people are getting hit.
We could probably talk about for another hour on all of the different maneuvers and laws and violations that we see in safe driving, but obviously we don't want to keep you here all day. Questions? Maya, questions?
Yes, so thank you so much.
Sorry, we ran over, but
So you guys provided a lot of information and a lot of different things, and I did have some questions that came in. One is, what should you do if you have a family member that you're concerned about, that, you've seen some red flags, how do you proceed with that? How do you, what suggestions do you have?
So there is a form through MVD that you can fill out. I think doctors can do it, law enforcement, caretakers, things like that, where you go on and you request a retest for that person, and that family member you're concerned about will have to go down to MVD and do another eye exam, maybe even go through a test to make sure that they understand the rules of the road, and then they could also be involved in a road test. So that would be a great idea to do that. Understand though, even if MVD suspends their license or revokes it, they can still physically be able to get in that car. So if it comes to that point, I would hide the keys. If you can justify that. Obviously you don't want to take their keys and then leave them at home and have no ability to get anywhere to doctor's appointments, but you need to start thinking about doing that and then making it easier for them, arrange for a ride share, work with family members, things like that.
sometimes it comes down to that hard conversation. There's some conversations we don't like to have, but we have to sit down with our parents at some point, just like they had to sit down with us at one point in our lives. We now have to turn the table and sit down and have that hard conversation. Is this truly safe? Is it truly safe for them? Is it truly safe for the community? And it's, it comes down to a lot of stubbornness. I'm not going to say I would be any different.
Sorry.
We're all going to be stubborn at different points.
I got spanked when I was stubborn as a kid. Now, I'm not suggesting you spank your parents, but it comes to that. Thinking about it myself.
It's certainly a challenge.
Yeah, and I think also definitely you mentioned incorporating your physician into it, because hopefully they can maybe come at it from a different angle to support the family. What about is there any local refresher driver courses or defensive driving programs for older adults that we have in Tucson?
We do have a branch of AAA locally, and I think they're out on Oracle on the northwest side of town. I think that they offer some things. Some of the driving schools here locally offer some programs. Of course, there's a fee, but they offer some programs incorporated for young drivers, new drivers, and older folks. So you would just have to reach out to a few of those. The online courses, like I said, AAA and ARP have an abundance when you go to their website on this topic especially. So some of those can be achieved online, but the physical classes, I would recommend checking in with some of the local driving schools.
Great, thank you. And I know you had a couple of things about some tests that were available in your PowerPoint, and we're happy to share those with anybody if they'd like that presentation so that they can grab that information. Links are long, so I just want to make sure people know that they can look at too. I want to thank you both for being here. This was wonderful. I am going to wrap up with our online audience. I'm going to turn it over to you to answer any questions in person. Thanks again for being here.
We appreciate you. Thank you for having us here today, everybody.
Thank you. Thanks so much for being here. We look forward to seeing you again. We will be back on Tuesday, February 4th at 10 a.m. for Managing Stress for Better Aging. This is all part of our February Heart Health Month, so that will be the first class that we'll kick off with. If you are interested in that class or in any of our upcoming heart health classes, please give us a call and we'd be happy to get you signed up for those. The classes, you can give us a call. Our phone number is 520-386-3788. 324-1960. We hope to see you again next week. Thank you.